I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I be afraid? The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall light, light of the world. He is the light, He is the light of the world.
Lift your hands and say,
He is the light, light of the world.
everlasting.
He is the light, He is the light of the world. He's ever shining, shining in my soul. So ever shining, shining in my soul.
Darkness comes, don't fret or cry. Just call on Jesus and do as I. Let me tell you, He will save your soul, renew your strength. Open up your heart and let the light come in, 'cause He's ever shining, shining in my soul.
So ever shining,
Shining in,
shining in my soul. God's word is a lamp unto my feet
and a light
and a light
to my path.
unto my path. Everywhere I go, I'll take my light,
So that men might see
so that men might see
Jesus in me.
Christ in me. And He is
Shining,
shining,
shining, He's
ever,
He's ever shining.
shining.
Oh,
Jesus is ever
ever shining,
shining,
shining in my soul.
ever
Jesus, Yeshua,
shining.
He's shining.
Jesus is ever
He's ever
shining,
shining in my soul.
ever
He's ever
shining,
oh, He's ever
shining in my soul. So ever shining,
shining in.
shining in my soul.
Oh, He's shining,
Ever
shining,
shining,
He's ever,
ever
He's ever
shining.
oh,
Jesus is ever
shining,
shining,
He's ever shining
ever
in my soul.
shining. Jesus is ever
Ever shining,
shining,
you know He
ever
He's
shining,
Jesus is ever
shining in my soul. So ever shining,
shining in.
shining in my soul. Ever shining,
Shining in.
shining in my soul. So ever shining,
He's shining in.
shining in my soul. My soul ever shining,
Shining in.
shining in my soul. So ever shining,
Shining in.
shining in my soul.
So you're gonna sing it twice.
Take my hand, lead me on. Let me stand. I'm tired. I am weak. I am worn through the storms, through the night. Lord, lead me to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on. Let me stand. Oh, I'm tired. I am weak. I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lord, lead me to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
Welcome everyone. Can you hear me? Wonderful. Thank you for coming out in the cold. Thank you for being here at our annual Martin Luther King Jr. Symposium. I want to recognize the founder of this series, Dr. Larry Allams, who is here with us. Dr. Allams and friends, Albert Black and John Castle, created this program in an effort to think critically about Dr. King's legacy. There were parades, there were Memorize, I Have a Dream events, but the occasion to reflect seriously upon the legacy of a major American leader, a transformative American leader, was a gift that Dr. Allams and Albert Black and John Castle have given our city, and I'm proud to carry forward. We're gathered here in this remarkable sanctuary to honor and remember Dr. King's legacy. I want to thank also Dr. Lucretia Faison, Reverend Dr. Lucretia Faison, the gracious congregation of St. Paul United Methodist Church, Tabitha Shears, yes, you, and the St. Paul Choir, who so beautifully just sang Dr. King's favorite hymn, Take My Hand, Precious Lord. We are in an extraordinary space and in an extraordinary time. This church is itself a monument to what Dr. King might call soul force. It was built by people who had endured slavery and who transcended it, who established new institutions like this one, appropriate for their lives as free people. And this building, amidst all the shiny and glassy new construction in our city, remains a testament to the grounded hope and the soaring capacities of people who take their soul life seriously. And it's surely fitting to recall the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King here. When I first began planning today's event, it was about this time last year, I was impressed to see that Martin Luther King Day would coincide with the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States. We could not have known the outcome of the national elections at that time, but one thing was clear to me. In a time of profound polarization, we would need a powerful voice and a healing voice to call to our consciousness the summons and the hope that Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy still offers us. So I decided to reach out to Dr. Ruth Simmons, an extraordinary educational leader, a visionary one. I knew this before I met her today, and I'm even more convinced of that visionary power today after speaking with her. I proposed to her that we structure our conversation around the title of Dr. King's final book. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And I was thrilled, of course, when she accepted our invitation. Although Dr. King's provocatively titled book was written in 1967, the question, you might agree with me, feels timely today. Dr. King wrote the book just 3 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act. Yet even after that epoch-making victory, Dr. King's civil rights coalition was imperiled. It was splintering. His authority, especially among younger people, was waning. I'm not for that nonviolent stuff anymore, Dr. King reports hearing a young activist say. It was a backlash that they were experiencing to integration in the Voting Rights Act. The essays in this final book are Dr. King's response to a crisis of confidence in politics. Even so, even at that difficult moment, Dr. King's writings reveal that his confidence in the American experiment remained strong and unwavering. Indeed, in his writings, Dr. King redoubles his commitment to nonviolence and to the efficacy of what he calls soul force. He urges his readers to love one another and to lead a revolution in values. This message came through loud and clear when Dr. King, I'm proud to say, was welcomed to Dallas at SMU the new home of the Dallas Institute, on March 17, 1966. To his Dallas audience at McFarland Auditorium, Dr. King said this about love. I'm not talking about emotional bonds. I'm not talking about some sentimental or affectionate feeling. And I think it would be nonsense to urge oppressed people to love their violent oppressors in an affectionate sense. Instead, what Dr. King advocated from the stage at SMU was a particular kind of love named by the Greek language agape. Agape, Dr. King explained, is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. When one rises to love on this level, one loves every man, not because he likes him, not because his ways appeal to him, but because God loves him. And Dr. King goes on to say, I'm so glad he didn't tell us we had to like our enemies. So in violent and troubled times, Dr. King asks in earnest, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? He tacitly proposes that the choice is in our hands. We need not be passive. We ourselves can construct a culture worthy of us and of those who come after us. So a culture, I want to say this again, we ourselves can construct a culture worthy of us and of those who come after us, for whom we are responsible. At the Dallas Institute of Humanities and Culture at SMU, we work to clear a space for generative and creative conversations about our culture. Ideally, these conversations are informed by agape, the creative and dignifying force of which Dr. King spoke at SMU in 1966 and which he himself embodied. It is the Institute's mission to enrich the practical life of the city with the wisdom and imagination of the humanities. Our hope is that today's program will revivify us and embolden us all to be co-workers in the kingdom of culture, as another great African-American thinker, W.E.B. Du Bois, put it. To clear the way for such work, such thought, such creativity, I now invite a beautiful singer, Jasmine Williams, to the podium. Ms. Williams is a music student finishing her degree under the tutelage of Dr. Barbara Hill Moore at the Meadow School of the Arts at SMU. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you.
On 1,000 hills and dales, peace, peace in the hearts of men, while kindliness reclaims the soil where bitterness has been. is drifting past. The storm of shell assist. Disrupted is the courting fell. Sweet charity released. Forth from the shadows swift we come, wrought in the flame as one beneath the sun in brotherhood Good evening. I'm Reverend Dr. Lucretia Faison, and on behalf of the members of St. Paul United Methodist Church, where we love all people, body and soul, we welcome you all to this sacred space this evening. It is our honor and privilege to share it with you. I have the distinct honor of introducing our speaker for this evening. Dr. Ruth J. Simmons, who served previously as president of Prairie View A&M University, is a President's Distinguished Fellow at Rice University and Senior Advisor to the President of Harvard. Prior to joining Prairie View, she was President of Brown University from 2001 through 2012. Before serving as President of Brown, she was President of Smith College, the largest women's college in the United States. A graduate of Dillard University, Dr. Simmons completed her PhD in Romance Languages and Literatures at Harvard. Before her appointment as a college president, she held various faculty and administrative positions at the University of Southern California, Princeton University, and Spelman College. Dr. Simmons has served on numerous nonprofit boards, including the boards of trustees of Dillard University, Howard University, Princeton University, Rice University, and Morehouse College. She is a member of the Council of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Board of Trustees of the Museum of Fine Arts of Houston and the Alley Theater, and chairs the board of the Houston branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Her many honors include a Fulbright Fellowship to France, President's Award from the United Negro College Fund, the Fulbright Lifetime Achievement Medal, the Eleanor Roosevelt Valkill Medal, the Foreign Policy Association Medal, the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, and the Centennial Medal from Harvard University. She is a member of the National Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Philosophical Society, and the Council on Foreign Relations. In 2012, she was named a Chevalier of the French Legion of Honor by the President of France, and in 2023 received the National Humanities Medal from President Joe Biden. Friends, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you this evening Dr. Ruth J. Simmons.
Thank you so very much. Reverend Doctor. Like the sound of that. Reverend Doctor. It's a pleasure to be in your house and the house of the Lord. It's a pleasure to be here among people who want to honor history and the achievements of an extraordinary human being, Martin Luther King. I'm pleased to be here. I was terrified to come because of the weather, but it turns out I lucked out because I left Houston and it's gonna be snowing in Houston tonight. You know, in Houston, we like to point to Dallas as having worse weather, you know? But I guess turnabout is fair play. How many of you spent most of your day watching the inaugural festivities? Well, I confess I'm very disappointed in you. The transfer of power every 4 years, that's one of the most extraordinary and important actions that take place in this country. And no matter what the circumstances, it's important to be aware of it. And I must say that I had the chance to listen to the entire inaugural address, which wasn't so much an address, but a campaign speech. But still, juxtaposing that with what we know of this extraordinary man, Martin Luther King Jr., it was such a blessing to listen to that today, because I can, with renewed commitment, talk about some of the features of this man. Am I not speaking loudly enough? No, I'm not? You may not want to hear what I have to say. Thank you. And I'm pleased to say, after many months of arranging to be here, that I finally got to meet Simi, and I know now that I have a new friend. Thank you so much for inviting me. And let me say a word as a university president of the people who had the forethought to think about the place of the humanities and what they bring to us as a practical reality, and to put this before people in this way. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to talk mostly about Martin Luther King, in keeping with the theme of the evening. The tragic circumstances of his untimely death and the upheaval and alienation that followed are etched in the memories of anyone who lived through that turbulent period. Anybody alive at that time can remember where they were when they heard the news. I was on a Fulbright year in France, and a group of friends decided to go on holiday to Spain. And so we went to Spain, and we were camping near a small town in Spain. And one morning, one of them entered my tent and said abruptly, "Ils l'ont tué." Well, I'm just waking up. I'm trying to understand, what are you saying? "Ils l'ont tué." He kept saying that before he could get out, "Martin Luther King." And then it came to me that he was saying that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. I couldn't believe it, of course. And this was a seminarian from Africa, and I was the only American in our group. So we hastened into the nearby town to see if we could find some verification of this news. We got into this small town, very small town, and immediately we could see people standing around the square with newspapers, some of them weeping. Now, this is in a small town in France, in Spain. In Spain. I'm thinking, of course, how can it be that they can feel my pain this far away from the reality of what we know in the United States, and yet they could? Such was the preeminence of this person, Martin Luther King Jr. But frankly, these many years later, the fact that recognition events like this today remain relevant reveals not simply the importance of his life and vision. Somebody's going to have to get me a Kleenex, I'm afraid. His life and vision, but also the stark reality of a nation still dogged by the legacy. A whole box? Okay. Who knows, I might need it. Of a nation still dogged by the stark reality of a legacy of slavery, racism, and Jim Crow. Now, don't get excited because I cry a lot. In fact, as you might imagine, I'm called on to do a lot of commencement speeches, and last year, in the spring, I was asked to give the commencement speech at Barnard in New York. And feeling so touched by the difficulty that students at Columbia and Barnard were facing over the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, I wanted to do what I could. I didn't realize I was not up to it. I got to the podium and I started my speech, and the tears came forcefully. Not only did they come at that moment, but I actually cried all the way through my speech. All the way through my speech. I was livid, of course, incredibly embarrassed. But here's what I learned. When I arrived at Radio City Music Hall, where they held commencement, the tension was quite visible. Parents, students, at odds with the group opposing Israel or the group opposing Hamas. And the conflict was so evident from signs in the audience and from hissing and booing constantly in the course of the ceremony. And I'm thinking, this is supposed to be one of the most special events in a young person's life, and this is what they will always remember of this moment. And so I cried, thinking about that. I apologized profusely afterwards for breaking down and totally losing it. But then they told me something important, and that is, that was the only time in the whole commencement when the audience was quiet, because they were crying too. So sometimes we just need to cry. Sometimes we need to. King's death, frankly, I can think of no time where confidence and trust in so many sectors, and especially in purported leaders and formerly revered institutions, has sunk so low. In every decade following the King era, and increasingly in the current time, we found reason to remind the world and coming generations of the legacy of this great man whose moral stature and enduring example remains intact. For no philosophy, no leader, no movement has yet emerged to unseat King as the broadest and most defining human rights activist in the nation's history. Today, can there be any doubt that we are mired in social ills and divisions that cry out for robust policies, concerned actions, and courageous leaders to advance the central aims of our democracy, freedom, equality, and justice? Shaping a path through the current divisions in the country is an urgent task, perhaps our most urgent task, as hatreds and biases are irresponsibly stoked. We long for a compelling voice of reconciliation and a humane and healing expression of inclusiveness. Martin Luther King Jr. was that voice in his time, and I would contend he remains that voice today. In a 1957 article in Christian Century, the prophetic King warned us of the consequences of physical violence and corroding hatred. He said that if we, quote, succumb to the temptation of using violence in the struggle for justice, unborn generations will live in a desolate night of bitterness. A desolate night of bitterness. And their chief legacy will be an endless reign of chaos. Martin Luther King's vision for justice in America required, as you heard, agape love. Agape love. He called upon himself, his followers, and all of us to project the ethics of love to the very center of our lives. Agape. Can you say that? Agape. King's greatness as an historical figure emanates from many aspects of his philosophy and example. His beloved community was the image of a community of cooperation and respect for all. He vigorously eschewed the notion that some are more entitled or more privileged than others. He gave his life to the idea that the least of us is deserving of love, respect, and equality. The goal of establishing such a community remains, it seems, a worthy one. But today, our nation is unabashedly replete with demands of privilege. Economic privilege, racial privilege, social privilege, individual privilege, social and economic inequality, many may assert. It's the natural order. They may express scorn for those who would offer a more humane approach in the vein of King's beloved community and depict them as unknowing and irrelevant, weak and envious. Loud voices calling for acceptance of inequality, poverty, brutish exclusion, and racial domination are once again amplified by the silent nods of some and the indifference of others. And I must say, as a young person growing up during this era, it wasn't so much that people hated me for being black. It was the fact that so many people were silent in the face of that. Remember our children and what they see from us. Remember how vital it is for us to demonstrate in as powerful way as we can our own sense of commitment to justice. In a no less contentious era, Martin Luther King lived his life out loud, inviting us into his struggles and fears. No matter how much he was extolled and celebrated, he expressed no scorn for others. Indeed, he did not hesitate to reveal his weaknesses and doubts. The brash certitude and arrogance at large today was not for him. Humility guided his steps, and respect for others illumined his way. His questioning and thoughtfulness did not diminish him. It elevated him even further as a leader. Why can't people get that? It may sound really wonderful to boast about yourself and your accomplishments and how wonderful you are, to you. But how does that help others value you as a leader? I don't know. The man reflected in his thoughts, the thoughts you've heard about, and in his behaviors, I believe, is the product of a type of intellectual and spiritual life and disposition that is receding from our priorities today. It seems fitting on this occasion to point out not only how the serious study of the humanities shaped his path, but also how it bolstered his leadership and the endurance of his positive example for so many generations. After all, as Simi said, the Humanities Institute aims to enrich the practical life of the city with the wisdom and imagination of the humanities. Martin Luther King Jr. deployed the humanities to change the course of a nation. Take that, you scientists and technologists. I believe, what can have been more practical than that? Changing the course of a nation. I believe if one is attentive to this aspect of his life in particular, one can't help but reflect on the danger to which we expose the future by neglecting, downgrading, and in extreme cases, eliminating the study of humanities in our schools. Today, not only is the world in the throes of enormous economic, health, religious, and other travails, but our country has recently experienced increased civil turmoil, focusing on the frayed hopes of many who believe that peace through mutual respect and dignity was finally at hand for every stratum and stripe, every gender, color, and religion, every ability and preference. Those of you who did take the time to listen to the inaugural address today heard the declaration that henceforth there would be only 2 genders allowed in this country. For while we see vast innovations in science and technology, we seem unable to solve the intractable dilemma of humans accepting and respecting others in the interest of a common, life-affirming humanity. It's often the very intelligence that invites innovation that interferes with achieving that end. We differentiate based on the most superficial and falsely constructed differences: where one is born, how people speak, what they eat, whom they love, whether they have the full range of abilities we expect. Instead of reaching out to learn about and appreciate others, we often live behind walls constructed by prejudgments in a manner that belies the openness and freedom we so frequently espouse. Martin Luther King's knowledge of society and culture, his grasp of history, and his extraordinary ability to articulate poetically a way forward transformed a gritty and divisive era into a compellingly successful call for a different kind of community. Again, I'm in this mode when I'm listening to the inaugural address. Martin Luther King's words are in my head, and I'm thinking of that poetry, of the elegance of his speech. And I'm hearing things that, I don't know, suggest just the opposite. Just the opposite. So I'm getting lost thinking about that speech. So he was a wonderful embodiment of a vision of a unified nation in which diverse peoples respect and celebrate their common worth and humanity. His faith in our ability to love and respect each other was a concept that calmed and reassured us in a tumultuous period. His seriousness of purpose persuaded us of the importance and attainability of such a goal. His inclusive vision lifted us beyond an extended and sordid history of divisiveness and discrimination. In short, his articulation of the creation of a beloved community was more than just a lofty ideal. It was a practical solution to an intractable dilemma. Listen to his description of nonviolence. Quote, this is from Where Do We Go From Here? The beauty of nonviolence is that it is its own way. It seeks to break the chain reaction of evil with a majestic sense of spiritual power. It seeks to elevate truth, beauty, and goodness to the throne. To the throne. What a poet. Quoting liberally from the humanities, from Cicero to Longfellow to Frantz Fanon, his probing intellect introduced reasoning that might lead us away from, quote, the long and desolate night of violence toward the world house that we must construct together. Listen to his metaphorical call for unity. We have inherited a large house in which we have to live together. Today, that world house stands in need of repair. In a 1957 article in Christian Century, the prophetic king warned us of the consequences of corroding hatred. He said that if we succumb to the temptation of using violence in the struggle for justice, again, generations will live in that desolate night of bitterness. His greatness as a historical figure emanates from so many aspects of his character and his intellect. In his intellect, I'm constantly amazed when I read him to think about his word craft. Amazing. He had truly a poetic imagination brought down to a very real level, able to influence. And I think in some ways, this is, of course, prophetic. You probably do this, Reverend Doctor. There's something in the ministry that arouses this, it seems to me, from the studies and readings of the Bible. But he practiced it to a fairly well. He was brilliant, you know. He went off to Morehouse at the age of 15, skipped a couple of grades, got to Morehouse, and majored in sociology, and then went on to further studies. I once had the opportunity to stand in the pulpit at Boston University where he preached. That in itself was moving for me. Just to stand where he stood, preaching truth and showing the way for us who came behind him. On a trip to India some years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the ashram of Mahatma Gandhi. As you know, an ashram is a kind of religious contemplative space. The director of the facility, knowing that I was from the United States, an African American, took me aside, very excited, to tell me about Dr. King's visit to the ashram years earlier, a visit about which King was to write himself. The director enthusiastically related that when King visited the ashram, he made a special request to be allowed to sleep there overnight, alone. And so they prepared a pallet. Do you all know what a pallet is? Okay, all right. I have to be sure. Made him a pallet on the floor where he spent the night there in reflection. I pictured him lying on the floor in austere conditions, considering how he might ready himself for the path he had chosen. Serious reflection was a hallmark of Martin Luther King Jr. and of his leadership. He was inspired by this fellow spiritual leader and by reflecting deeply about Gandhi's role in India, he was ultimately to inspire legions himself. Through his persistent inquiries into the history and nature of our national dilemma, King showed us a way forward instead of a way backwards. First, he showed us how to be exacting in our expectations of ourselves. We often endorse aspects of his teachings deemed relevant for our adversaries, while ignoring admonitions relevant to how we behave. Racism and bigotry is problematic not just when others perpetrate acts of hostility in its name, but also when we, in the very secret enclaves of our thoughts and actions, think and express racist beliefs. If we are to be serious about being with King on the right side of history, we must actively work to banish bigoted behavior from our own actions, leaving space in our hearts and actions for bigotry of any kind offers a petri dish environment for hatred and discrimination. Like King, we must rid ourselves of hatred of the other. Now, as a college president, you know, I have occasion to speak to students about some of the ways in which they divide themselves, and do so in ways that are wounding to their fellow students. And in our national life today, it seems that we take a particular pleasure, a kind of voyeurism through, I don't know, media, social media, looking at the ways in which people are treating each other in obscene and unjust ways. Okay, now, how many of you know who Kendrick Lamar is? A few of you? Okay. How many of you know who Drake is? What is that about? For example, why do you waste our time and energy on nonsense? Two wealthy performers, but there's another side of it, and that is people's enjoyment of following it so closely and offering opinions about who's wrong and who's right. Neither of them is right. We must discipline ourselves in terms of what we will tolerate, and must not encourage behavior purely because we are peering in and enjoying the experience. Okay? King taught us much also about an elusive element, hope. James Melvin Washington's edition of King's writings is entitled A Testament of Hope. His King was optimistic. In the face of death threats and bombings, he was optimistic. In the face of jailings, he was optimistic. In the face of bitter and dangerous adversaries, he was optimistic. His optimism arose, he said, from, quote, the sense of affirmation generated by the challenge of embracing struggle and surmounting obstacles. Do I need to read that again? His optimism arose, he said, from the sense of affirmation generated by the challenge of embracing struggle and surmounting obstacles. In other words, he was not whining about the work. He was saying the work itself, the difficulty of the work itself, the striving to overcome difficulty was elevating him and causing him to be optimistic. And that is what we must do. Remain optimistic because we are engaged in the struggle to improve lives and build the beloved community. We must remain hopeful because we are actively working to surmount obstacles to equality and justice. We must remain stalwart because we are responding to virulent hatred and clearing our own hearts of hate. We're all familiar, of course, with the I Have a Dream speech made famous at the 1964 March on Washington. The dream that King articulated at that historic moment was for one nation where all are equal, not only before the law, but also in the realm of human respect and friendship. Envisioning a compassionate future in which we care for one another across a chasm of difference, King saw love as the ultimate solution for the divisions in our country. He saw compassion as not only the most effective salve for deep divisions, but also as a bridge to a more equitable reality in which these differences do not impede our common aims and opportunities. I believe that a century from now, the world will still be reaching out to and elevating the memory of this man. Oh, to have lived in his time. What a gift that has been. To be influenced by a man of his genius and to have a model to live by, who has in time continued to feed us. Imagine that. 60, 70, soon 80, 90 years on, we're still drawing nourishment from what he preached. Those of us privileged to live in these times are closer to his example than those who will look to him a century from now. So we must use this proximity to his lived example to renew our commitment to the just world for which he fought and died. So it's time to reassert the importance of King's dream. Following this dream can be far more powerful than fighting the reality of challenging economic goals. It's more powerful than rioting to assert political power. This American dream sets before us a standard of moral behavior that often gets lost in our efforts to become wealthy, more successful, or more powerful than others. It ushers us onto a meaningful path that cannot disappoint, because it embraces a gratifyingly shared future that builds a better nation and a better world. It bridges chasms that angrily hurled projectiles can't. It animates in each of us a common striving, and it gives us a deep and abiding contentment that narrow prejudice can never afford. I know something of that contentment because of the way Martin Luther King has influenced my life. When I was a girl growing up in East Texas, the last child of sharecroppers, I didn't see a future. I imagined that I would become a maid, as most women that I knew and loved at that time were. But this man put in our minds the possibility, the possibility of our worth at a time when we dared not believe that we were worthy, because we were told that every day. And yet, in his poetic way, he lifted us. So I often say to people, and I'd like to remind people when they tout my achievements and so on, especially when I became the first Black president of an Ivy League university, I like to say to them, the most important thing about that is not that I'm president of Brown. It's that a black girl from the poorest neighborhood in Houston became president of an Ivy League university. That's the import of it. That's the import. In these and the times to come, the American dream cannot just be a great house and a fancy car. It can't be an entitlement to earn more than our parents and to live better than others. It has to be an aspiration to improve upon the benefits we've all received from those who fought for our freedoms. How? By being equitable, by respecting difference, by speaking truth, by accepting the full burden of citizenship, by fighting hopelessness, by not giving in to hatred, by proclaiming unashamedly that we believe. We can bring about the change we need. I am convinced of that. And so, like Martin Luther King, I am today, in spite of much of what I heard today, I am optimistic. I am optimistic. And so wherever we go, whatever we do, King's example calls on us to be a believer in justice, a believer that every human being matters, a believer who actively works to make this nation and the world the beloved community that he envisioned. And most of all, remembering his "I have a dream" speech. We need to all be honing our skills at dreaming. Honing our skills at dreaming. It's so easy to look at what we face and to say, and to shrug our shoulders and say, oh, what can be done? No. I apologize, it sounded like I was talking to a 2-year-old. No. You must be dreamers too. You must be. I thank you for having me, and I wish you the best in improving your skills as a dreamer. How are you going to do the questions? Oh. Well, I think I get to sit down.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Dr. Simmons, that was amazing. Wow. Will we have 2 of those, or?
Yes, ma'am. I'll send you.
Okay. Good evening. How about everybody stand and give another round of applause for this beautiful, amazing, inspiring talk. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. You good? All right. My name is Arlene Ford, and I am going to be taking a few questions from you. But before I do that, I want to do what I call a little Arlene, if you don't mind.
If you can please.
Okay.
Because the car's still running.
Oh, somebody's car, a Jeep, has its lights on, VJB 3005. You might want to go and get that so your batteries don't run out. Did we get that? Okay, all right. Okay, so we just heard a lot, yes? How many of you are feeling a little emotional? Anybody? Feeling a little bit? And the emotions, thank you for being honest about that. The emotions can come from both sides, right? We just had some things happen, and for some of us, it's a good thing, and some of us, it's not so good a thing. We can be on both sides. But there's a lot of emotions right now I know I am feeling, and so I suspect that we're all feeling a little bit of that. So I'm going to ask you to do yourself a favor. How about you take a deep breath right now? Everybody take a deep breath. Hold it and slowly let it go. All right, one more. Deep breath. Hold it and one more. And the last one on your own. Okay. So, Dr. Ruth has asked us to be dreamers. Being dreamers is not such an easy thing to do, especially right now. So what's coming up for me is thinking about how do we have grace for the person on the other side so that we can continue to be dreamers. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Well, it often, when I'm confronted with that question, it's not working? Okay. Often when I'm confronted with that question, as a practical matter, I go to this question: what other choice do we have? What other choice do we have? And so, you know, my book tour has been very helpful to me because it's put me in front of a wide variety of audiences, many audiences that, of course, don't agree with me about the way that I see the world. And it gives me a wonderful opportunity to hone my skills of listening. We should listen more. What's the big deal listening to things that you don't like? I mean, what's that about? I had 11 brothers and sisters that I had to listen to, okay? So why is it we don't want to hear things that unsettle us? Why is it? I've spoken to so many people today, and of course I want to talk about the ceremonies today, and so many people say they didn't watch, they didn't hear today. What is that? Now, admittedly, some things are painful to us, right? That's true. But we have to develop the capacity to hear things that are unpleasant to us or different from what we believe. And this is why, it seems to me, the humanities are so important to us, and why our children in schools, we need to redouble our efforts to make sure that they are reading widely and reading history, reading literature, reading people's thoughts. We have to redouble our efforts because what if we grow up thinking that everything has to be in dulcet tones that we love? What if we grow up that way? I'm very grateful that when I was at Wellesley College, I was in a philosophy class. You're going to be sorry you gave me this microphone. I know you're thinking that right now. But I'll tell you this, and I'll stop. In this philosophy class, Greek philosophy class, and somehow the instructor had brought up the notion of apartheid, and the class was debating this system of apartheid. And of course, everybody right down the line in class was saying how horrible it was and so forth, naturally. And then this girl raised her hand and started to speak. She happened to be a white South African, and she started defending apartheid. I have never forgotten that experience. You know why? Because if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have learned anything in that class, in that discussion, because everything was the same, right? right? I didn't have to think about it. And so if we don't encounter difference, it's hard for us to figure out what we actually are and what we actually do think and what we believe in and so forth. So we need to have that difference. When I was, I shouldn't say this because there might be Brown people here, but when I used to welcome students to Brown, I would say, listen, if you're thinking about coming to Brown, if you don't want to hear different views, please don't come here. If you don't want to spend time revealing to others who you are, don't come here. If you think that you're the most important person and that your views trump everything else, don't come to Brown, go to Harvard instead. Sorry.
Well, thank you for that. So, I'm a Brown mom and a Harvard grad, so, I'm good with both of those. Okay, so you got it. Listen to the other person. The differences that we have push our thinking, allows us to learn. I got it. You got it? Okay, good. So now, questions in the audience. There's a young man right back there. Come on up to the mic, sir.
Thank you. And I'm not quite so young, but Dr. Simmons, beautiful speech. From what I heard, it seems as if the constant refrain is remembering King as a benchmark of living in community. The society that we're living in today is telling us to look more inward and not focus on outward things such as community building, et cetera, et cetera. Things such as social media, AI, these algorithms that are tailored to make sure we're only focused on ourselves. If we place King today, just from what you would have to say or what you would think about what King would say, how do you think he would approach this? Because from what I'm hearing, it seems as if community is the salve to all of our ills and problems in society.
Well, I'm not really able to say what he would say, but I could tell you what I say in regard to that, because I work with young people and I see the effects that it has, creating harsher divisions and superficial relationships with people through distant relationships. I know you've read about people who are involved with artificially created personas who come to fall in love with them, thinking that they're real, right? And this is why, as I said, the danger for us is that we become so enamored with these doodads and these new media, there will be more to come, that we forget the underlying value of who we are as human beings. We come to lose sight of who we actually are. We think that it's all about a trendsetter and what they are wearing one day, and should we now go and imitate that, okay? It's all about the fact that some individual says something that catches on and we take that up. My students at Brown would sometimes come and say, Ruth, I'd say, put all of that down and go and sit in the yard and read a book, okay? And talk to people. We have a wonderful president at Brown whose name is Reginald DeRoche. That's the way they pronounce it, but it's really DeRoche. And I correct him all the time for, can't get him to pronounce it right. But he is out among the students all the time, having interactions with them. Okay? That's what we all have to do. I sometimes grab students, right? For the sheer palpability of knowing someone who touches you, okay? I used to go and stand in a corner in the student center at Brown, and I would just stand there because I knew what was going to happen. Students would all come up and hug me, okay? A hug. You know, when was the last time you went into some place and you hugged somebody that you didn't know? Probably afraid to do it, right? Right? Think of all the young people growing up who never get to experience that immediate connection to another person. And so I think that the AI direction that we're talking about is created by people who are especially weak in this domain and don't know it. But as soon as you look at them, you know that they don't know it, right? And so namby-pamby, did I say that? Namby-pamby administrators and policymakers that genuflect to science and technology, spurning the lessons of art and humanity and the social sciences, are making a terrible mistake, because what we're going to end up with is something we're not going to like.
Okay, so I had this conversation with my kids. I'm not going to say any more. Any other questions? Oh, handsome young man over there.
It's my wife. So, you know, looking back at King's life, here we are in 2025, and we're looking back. It's, you know, I was very young, like 6 or 7 years old, but even then it seemed like there was this national sort of epic scale to what he did, and the civil rights movement involved so many people. And I'm wondering, is there any hope or energy in something that's much more local and focused in individual or community with a small c action? One way you can look back at what's been happening recently is sort of the disappointment in a national model of change, when it seems to be a regression model as opposed to a progressing model. So is there in your mind what kind of value is there in something that's much more local? While we were talking, I was looking up the lyrics to the hymn, "Brighten the Corner Where You Are." And so just would like your reaction to that.
Well, I think that any national movement is actually built on that. How many of you know Voltaire, cultivez votre jardin? Okay, so that's been going. Do I need to translate that? Go study French. Cultivate your garden. Start there, okay? Anybody should do it. That's your first priority, is with yourself and your immediate surroundings. So that's where we start. And there is immense and all-important value in that, it seems to me. At the same time, we live in a world when the problems being visited upon that community are so large, coming from people who don't understand. So what we've got to do is not only cultiver notre jardin, but we've also got to go and tell the governor about the garden that we're cultivating, right? We have to. So we have to care about policy. And we have to mobilize our power, because here's what was very apparent to me today. You know, they've been talking about about oligarchs. Well, I know a lot of these people, and they're very insecure, okay? The reality is that we can influence people because they want to be liked. They want to belong. They have the same human feelings that other people have. So we can't isolate them and say, oh, let's not deal with them. That's the opposite of what we should do. Let's deal with them. Let's be in conversation with them. Let's take them to task. Let's insist that they hear from us, and so forth. And as you bring small communities together for bigger import, that has to have an effect. It has to. And as I was looking at the parade after the inauguration, I was thinking about all of these people showing up in Washington from small towns all over the country who use just that. They've come from small communities and banded together to have their say, okay? And that's why to be silent in the face of that is not a strategy. We can't afford to be. And so people who believe that there are good things to do in this idea of community ought to espouse that as often and as loudly as they can, and band with others who believe it, and be active in trying to make sure that that comes to pass.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so community and then spread it out.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So we had a question right here. Okay, thank you, sir.
Madam, you've been at Brown, Prairie View, and Smith as president. What did you learn from those students as to what legacy they understood about Martin Luther King, and what was lacking among those students in understanding his legacy?
Oh, in understanding his legacy.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I think the generations that I've seen in my career, I would say from USC to Princeton to Smith and Brown and Prairie View, is that they have not been so in search of a model because they often feel that they have the model. And that is to say, examples known to them that they reify and follow. And so as a president, I've been keen to bring people in front of students who give them a perspective that, of course, they wouldn't have given their age, okay? Remember what they've been through, okay? So in my youth, the sordid history, I didn't have to seek it out. It hit me in the face. So when I went off to college, my fall of my college year, the President of the United States was assassinated. I mean, you couldn't avoid those events, and couldn't avoid the examples. Whereas today, you've got lots of alternatives. You got television, and you have all kinds of examples, but there's one aspect of this that I think is very important, and that is the eroding trust that young people have in leadership, period. Okay? That's a factor. And I think that it's going to be hard for anybody serious, like Martin Luther King, to garner that attention and that trust, because celebrity today, notoriety, overshadows that quality. And until we get back to teaching our children about the values that are so important to them being the kind of people they can be, then they will not be able to recognize it when they actually do see it. So, so we have a lot of work to do. All of this is just to say, again, the work. It's all in the work. And to me, as president of those 3 institutions, that's what it was. It was in the work. At Prairie View, the one thing I always wanted to do as president is I thought constantly about whether or not I could be an example to my students. Not a kind of false example. Like, I had a student at Smith who, you know, I was driving up campus one day, and I saw a student on crutches trying to get up the hill. So I stopped the car and said, "Get in, I'll take you where you need to go." And to my horror, she said, "Oh no, President Simmons, if you could do what you've done, I can certainly get up this hill on crutches." Really, I mean, so what I wanted instead was to have a way to demonstrate to students how important it was as a human being to come to know yourself and your capacity, to know others and what you have to give to others, and to commit yourself to what you want to do with your life that shares all of what you're able to do with the world, making it a better place. That's what I wanted to try to represent to my students. But most of all, I wanted to represent that I was not afraid to do the things that needed to be done. So when I was at Brown, I took on the slavery initiative, and you know, people laud that today, but at the time, it was not to me a big deal. Okay, telling the truth about the history of slavery in the early years of the country, and particularly with the Ivy League institutions and others. That's just a simple matter of telling the truth. That's all it was. I don't want it to be glorified as anything other than what we should all be doing, right? All of us. And then when I was at Prairie View, and the chancellor came along and told me that I couldn't make appointments, I wrote a letter to the community saying, the chancellor doesn't respect Prairie View. I will not stay under these circumstances. So my duty was always to show my students who I tried to be, although I failed, I'm sure, many times. I wanted them to see the striving, okay? And that's what we all must do, is to show more how important it is for us to work hard at being better, at bringing more community and so forth. Just show the striving of it, because my students were very forgiving when I made mistakes. But I think because they knew that I was trying so darn hard to do what the right thing might be.
So how many parents do we have in the audience? Grandparents, aunts, uncles. Have you gotten your charge? Do you know what you need to do? Are you clear? Okay. I think, unfortunately, that's all the questions we have.
Could I say
for-
something?
Yes.
Well, it's not my fault. You just raised parents and so
Oh,
forth.
Lord
Okay.
have mercy.
So,
I'm in trouble now.
so you know, say no. Okay?
Yes.
Say no. Are you hearing me? Okay. Say no to the silliness. okay? Don't apologize for wanting to be demanding of them. Be demanding, okay? And so, you know, students come to see me and they say, you know, I'm having trouble in this course, and you know, the teacher is not doing so and so. I gave them no comfort, right? Grow up. Go back to the course, and in fact, you should be in an even harder course. And because you're going to face so many trials in your life, this is nothing compared to what you're going to face. So go and do what you need to do. Say no, okay? All right. I had to.
hone your capacity to dream. Langston Hughes and Javon, thank you. Another student of Dr. Barbara Hill-Moore, a baritone from SMU's Meadows School of the Arts, engaged to be married to Jasmine Williams. What beautiful voices, what beautiful voices. Thank you so much for coming here this evening. Thank you, Dr. Simmons, for your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ford, for leading us into such a wonderful conversation. There are many others that I'd like to thank. The Department of English at SMU has been a great partner in this work, and I have named the people who we do not have time to thank, but to whom I owe deep thanks on the other side of the program. So please take a look and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.